Hello, this is George Lees in a fabulously historic place in the Borders, archiving the stay of Mary Queen of Scots in the Borders before she became a child bride in France. And there is Henry II, King of France, Diane de Poitiers, Marie Reine d'Écosse, that's Reign of Scotland, Francois Dauphin of France, and Catherine de Medici, Queen of France. And there is the Duke of Guise, and all of these are the families that are. So Mary Queen of Scots is I think the cousin of Henry VIII in England, or maybe the niece of Henry VIII. Here's the story told in the Jedburgh castle that she used to live in for a while. Mary Stuart was born on 8th December 1542, the only daughter of James V and Mary of Guise. She was only 6 days old when her father died and she became the queen. Henry VIII, King of England, tried to secure her hand in marriage for his eldest son, Prince Edward, but the Scots rejected this and crowned their young queen on 9th September 1543. Yeah, that is 1 year old. Infuriated, Henry attacked Scotland and war raged in the Scottish lowlands throughout the early years of Mary's reign. Fearing for their young queen's safety, the Scots turned to France for assistance and an agreement was struck. Mary was betrothed to Francis, heir to the French throne. I'm not sure if Francis, the Dauphin de France, the little one on the horse with the yellow saddle. Mary was betrothed to Francis, heir to the French throne. The Dauphin Francis, an engraving made to commemorate his marriage, and Mary Queen of Scots, an engraving made to commemorate her marriage. I don't know what age they were when they actually wed. Mary and Francis were brought up together in the French court. They enjoyed each other's company and formed a strong bond. One observer of the time remarked, "It is easy to see that God made them for each other." Mary was 5 years old when she sailed to France, accompanied by her 4 childhood companions, the Marys, Seton, Beaton, Livingston, and Fleming. Remember that she used to live in the massive palace at Livingston, where I used to live, at Kirknewton, just down the river valley. In the safety of the French court, she enjoyed a carefree and pampered life. Mary delighted in the chivalry of the French. She learned the language and moved with the court from chateau to lavish chateau. In 1558, at the age of 15, Mary married Francis, her childhood playmate. In the same year, following allegations of illegitimacy against Elizabeth I, she became claimant to the English throne. Already Queen of Scots, Mary was crowned Queen of France in 1559 on the death of the French king. Remember that woman, she is the one that appointed Davidson to proclaim that Queen Mary of Scots was to be executed. Rivalry all the way through, and that is Davidson, who is now the head of Scottish Tories. Not many people know that, and you don't have to be a genius to dissect it. And that is the lovers of Mary Queen of Scots. As soon as they had signed the treaty, they knew that if they did not sign the treaty quickly to have Mary Queen of Scots beheaded, that all of them would be killed by the Queen of England, the illegitimate Queen of England. And that is the movies that were made by Hollywood, featuring the actors and the man who made them vote for the beheading of Mary Queen of Scots was the boyfriend of Queen Elizabeth I. Yeah, and all of them are in the Hollywood movies portraying all of that stuff. But the woman that is Davidson is now head of Conservative Scotland. Absolutely sordid in the Holyrood Palace, where the Darnley affairs and things were held. Yeah, it is absolutely sickening, and that is Nicola Sturgeon launched by the Rothschilds into the same roles. Right under Arthur's Seat, which is a dormant volcano. And the gods can sort it out at any time when they do not like what is happening. With her husband's death, Mary lost her position as Queen of France, and on the 14th August 1561, the 19-year-old Queen returned to Scotland. So there's the fleur-de-lis. Yeah, and there is Notre Dame, which has been touched because of making videos like this. Yeah, and all of it was with Sean Maguire when we were talking about the families that sailed to America, and that was the bridge collapse in the region north of Italy, and the following day Notre Dame caught fire. It was the name of the ship that allowed America to be discovered was, I've forgotten what the linkage was to the bridge collapse in that city in Europe. It's also based on the naming of God, but it may come back to me before we stop making the video. So do you get it? You now understand that Davidson, yeah, is a weedy little political administrator, and the real decision makers are the boyfriends of the Queen of England, Elizabeth I. You've got grass cutters below. This time it's neck cutters. Miniature portrait of Mary painted on ivory, possibly dating from the late 19th century. Mary's beauty was much written and talked about. She was very tall, almost 6 foot, with a pale complexion and auburn hair. Although she enjoyed boisterous outdoor pursuits, her health was often frail. However, her delicate femininity disguised the strength of will, even obstinacy, which became her most vital characteristic. And ironically, someone with a sense of humour has placed a French poodle on top of that story. So this one was painted half a century after her death. Yeah? Can it be regarded as an accurate likeness? And here's the songs that are the folk output of people like the Corries, and this is the Bobby songs for the coinage in that era. Apart from the few portraits which can be authenticated, only the coinage of the period gives us an idea of what Mary really looked like. Despite the shortness of her reign, many new coins were struck. In 1565, a new coin, a silver rial, was minted to commemorate the marriage of Mary to her second husband, Lord Darnley. The Queen is believed to have ordered the coins to be withdrawn because they gave the impression that Darnley was her equal and his name appeared first. And all of this is occurring at the same time as the massive project to build a Panama Canal, and that is the name Darnley is an obfuscation for that project. Only 2 of these original coins survive. They are held in the collections of the British Museum and the National Museums of Scotland. Elizabeth and Barbara Curll were 2 of Mary's ladies in waiting, and it was Elizabeth who attended Mary in the last hours of life. The inscription on the memorial, yeah, believe that one if you like. That's the one in the movie that they want the decision to be made, and the inappropriately shy and weedy little character that is now the head of Scottish Conservatives, that is the massive deal that was the negotiation by Queen Mary I's boyfriend. I forget him, but he's a famous actor in all the religious movies that were ever made, yet right into Aztec land in South America. Yeah, and the taking over of those pygmy nations. I forget the name of the actor. And there is the false religion component of the story, and the killing of all the rival denominations and the replacement of the Stuart lineage by the German lineage that has to be Protestant if they want to be on the throne. If you're a Catholic and you want to keep your head on your shoulders, you have to be off the throne. The ownership of the set is unknown before 1866, when a priest sold it to a jeweller in Hanover, where the only legitimate baby of Queen Victoria was sired from that Hanover region by the princes who had enough royal marks to make Queen Victoria pregnant in secret, and that is the families that were of Teviotdale, yeah, and that is the families that were actually the butchers at Culloden, because they are the German takeover that happened in 1714. Yeah, all of Queen Vic's babies were bastards, except the one that we're describing here, blind Prince George of Cumbria and Teviotdale, and the butcher of Cumbria was the man who committed the massacres at Culloden. That's not in the historic archive for reasons that the Rothschild keep secret, as the parents of all of the bastard children of Queen Vic, bar that one. And here's the religious strife, that all of it led to the beheading of all of those Stuart family lineages, and that ironically is now the stable, the best stable for horse racing in Scotland, directly adjacent to Loch Leven, where Mary Queen of Scots was imprisoned. And 2 years ago, the owner of that stable won the Grand National for Scotland for the first time in 30 years. And it's run by the fabulous redhead, but I keep forgetting her name. She was at Kelso races 2 weeks ago, and she offered me a lift along the road. They won the Grand National 2 years ago when I was in exile in Kirknewton. Knox was one of Mary's staunchest critics. He despised her for her devotion to the Catholic faith and was bitterly opposed to the idea of a woman being in charge of the country. The two often argued, and Knox denounced Mary publicly from the pulpit. Yet that is the massive joke about St Andrew's Cross and the stool that was thrown at the pulpit by the protesting Protestant regime. That is Jenny Geddes' stool. And if you look at the pictures of it in Wikipedia, you'll see that it is the throwing away of Scotland's sovereignty. That is St Andrew's Cross, or the legs of Jenny Geddes' stool. And it's absolutely fabulous here. You're not in the bloodline. No. So there's Knox again, all of them making those lethal decisions. And there's Stuart, Earl of Lennox. That is the Lennoxes that became the concubines for Charles I and Charles II, like David Cameron's ancestors that are Nell Gwyn and that family bloodline tree. Still reading the news for BBC, right into the noughties. John Knox, Mary Fleming. So there's are the aides de camp for the tiny children that went to France to be married as children. Yeah, and that is the same story for Queen Victoria. Blind Prince George of Cumbria and Teviotdale was 14 years old, and Mary Queen of Scots, Queen Victoria, or Princess Victoria, was only 12 when she was inseminated by that only legitimate parent that she ever had, and they married in secret, and the birth of the children was in a bigamous period, and that all of it, none of the babies were sired by Prince Albert, who's a homosexual. And that led then to the murder in the noughties of Greg Hallett, my collaborator on the whole of the royal family's murderous story, and how all of the murders and the births are commissioned by Rothschild and their relatives, and they lead the country into all of the great wars. That is Hitler, Rothschild and Stalin, and all of them are the three wise men's joke from the Bible story. Yeah, there's John Erskine, Earl of Mar, and that is the joke about the Bible authors' nicknames include Mars, god of war. William Maitland of Lethington, Scotland diplomat and advisor to Mary. Ironic, so there's Walsingham, that was the man that was the lover of Mary, the Queen of England, Elizabeth I. And that is the famous actor in all those religious movies that played him, and Davidson was the man who carried the message that Queen Mary was to be beheaded immediately so that she could take over. And he was her boyfriend or lover, whichever you prefer. William Cecil, Lord Burleigh, Mary Livingston, and that is the Livingston Castle that Mary Queen of Scots used to live in. There's the Lennox concubines for the other dynasties, and there are the butchers that are the Earls of Morton. in World War II and World War I, they were the Batman for Winston Churchill and for Winston Churchill in World War II and for Butcher Haig of the Scottish borders in World War I. That's the Earls of Morton of Dalmahoy, which used to be right next door to another one of my safe houses, and I used to go there to watch the old firm games because they were very civilised people, and that is a championship level, open championship golf course called Dalmahoy. Yeah, and that is Morton, and their nickname is Sholto, and they have been the governors and the leaders of the war team right into the medieval nobility. Yeah, this one lived 1516 to 1581. And there's the Seatons and the aides de camp, chambermaids I think is the appropriate name, for Mary Queen of Scots when she was in France as just a child. Yeah? The characters, this is the very core of the drama, the principal characters with whom and against whom, yeah, her boyfriend, where's she gone? Yeah, Davidson, let's get it signed before they execute us. And she made the decision and handed it to Davidson. Yeah, and that is the Walsingham families that become the Rangers goalies for Protestantism. No, sorry, that is Fotheringay. He was the Rangers goalkeeper. And there are the aides de camp when they grow up. George Lord Seaton, James Stuart Earl of Moray, David Riccio, and I think he was involved in the affair where they murdered the man in the palace where Nicola Sturgeon now has her Parliament building, with swastika icons all over the roof of that Parliament building. James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, yeah, and that is the Hepburns that are actually in Hollywood, not Holyrood the Palace, but in Hollywood as the fabulous actors right through world history, making movies about going down the Nile and exploring darkest Africa, which becomes Queenie's colony. Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, yeah, and Mary Queen of Scots. Yeah, and the biggest cause of death in world history. Yeah, every denomination, every rival religion, all of them are invented by the Piso family thousands of years ago in ancient Naples, yeah, right under Vesuvius, and when they released the New Testament, Vesuvius erupted onto the home which for a laugh was called the Villa Papyri. So that is the crucifix for the non-existent Jesus that is the biggest cause of death and creates all of the world's billionaires from the massive scam that it represents. And there is the Scottish borders on the road where Rabsy Nisbet was born, between Langham and Hawick. That is the palace that she was kept in. I think that was the time that Darnley was her lover. Yeah, and all of it is covered up by spook stories about elves running around in those palaces, in the attic and in the downstairs places, and that is the Guelph versus Ghibelline wars all over Europe for 1,000 years, and that is why it's the biggest cause of death in world history, and they do not like to be associated with the decisions that make the rival woman the victim of a beheading. That has to be blamed on Davidson, and that is Davidson that is the head of Tories Scotland now. Elizabeth, Queen of England, yeah, and there is William Cecil, Lord Burleigh, Sir Francis Walsingham, her boyfriend, yeah, and Davidson's bully. Mary Beaton, Mary Livingston, these are the chambermaids. Mary Seaton, Mary Fleming, yeah, and that will be the legendary family that is 007 and everything that we have in every war that they engineer, so they're in charge of both sides and the funding of themselves. William Maitland Lethington, and there is John Erskine, Earl of Mar, which is the joke that the Bible author is the god of Mars. That's the god of war. Yeah, and that is Jim Marr. That is Mar on Panorama. And it goes right on today into the White House and number 10 Downing Street, where Boris Johnson is actually Boris Pfeffel, a Nazi. There's James Hamilton, oh sorry girls, Duke of Chattel-Herholt, Earl of Arran, and he's the one that I was reading about downstairs, because they had her on Ireland, on the island that is Arran, and that is largely run by Piso descendants. Yeah, with massive mansions. And there is a lock of Mary Queen of Scots' hair. Yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful place, and God bless Jedburgh for keeping it free to the public. Mary Queen of Scots chair in Conington Church, Huntingdon, I think that will be. Postcard showing a photograph of the chair in Conington Church, Cambridgeshire. Mary is reputed to have sat in this chair when awaiting her execution at Fotheringay Castle. Do you get it? The naming of the Rangers goalkeeper. When Fotheringay fell into disrepair, items were taken to Conington Castle. The castle was dismantled after the Second World War, which is presumably how the chair came to be in Conington Church. And there's a fragment of bed hanging, comes from Terregles House near Dumfries. So that is the Butcher of Cumbria. That is the Battle of Culloden, and the butcher from Germany that led the battles lived in Dumfries, and all those regions where the Pilgrim Fathers sailed from and congregated in on the border, and that once again is the place where Rabsy Nesbitt was playing his role in the Railway Children with the cousin of the Queen of England, that is David Attenborough. He was a Railway Children too. Sorry, Railway Child. That's bad grammar, and you could get your head cut off for that in the royal family as long as they were prepared to continue faking up the genealogy stories. Medal and pendant made for the 19th century souvenir market. Right then. And it's absolutely majestic. And in the ancient days, the spies in the team used to be behind the boards. Now they're the Fast Cars Syndicate. And my students, and everything is built on disloyal behaviours, so that the world's mafias can continue to execute its innocent people and become its billionaires. And there is the poodle joke. That is the gods turned to dogs and replaced by the brutal monarchs, who are the lovers of the contenders, who give the permission to behead the true queen. I think I'd better get my bus now. And here are the cannonballs that are used all over the world so that Queenie's Commonwealth can become what it has become. So, I'm not sure what this one is. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. Late 15th century replica Ombre. This replica 15th century Omblica food cupboard would have stored food and valuables in the time of Mary Queen of Scots. The Ombre was made by local craftsman Adrian McCurdy using traditional craft techniques. It is made from hand-planed planed boards held together with 80 oak pegs. That is the oak trees under which all of the pagans were massacred by the Christians, and that is the angel's wings joke. That is my favourite movie. That is It's a Wonderful Life, and every time you hear a bell ring, a pagan loses his life. Every time a bell rings, an angel for Christianity is born. It's no longer my favourite movie. It is absolutely cynical, and all the places that are funded by the historians now have the oak leaves as their symbol. Lady Jane Grosvenor. Penitent villain, giving back the fisheries that they stole during her regime as the Duchess of Roxburgh. So, do they have a dungeon? Mary's early years as ruler of Scotland were marked by fun, feasting and pageantry. She was an expert needlewoman and often sat with her ladies-in-waiting, embroidering and stitching. This fine example of 17th century Scottish appliqué work shows two scenes that relate to Mary Queen of Scots. Above, I think somebody's being drawn and quartered.
Sounds like it outside.
This fine example of 17th century Scottish appliqué work shows two scenes that relate to Mary Queen of Scots. I cannot see the images. Above, Mary's only son, King James VI and First, on horseback, a lion passant, the Thistle of Scotland, the Rose of England, and Anne of Denmark, the wife of King James. And below is alleged to be a masked lady on horseback with a page, the Scottish Thistle and the English Rose. I don't know whether or not England have pinched the exhibition, but I cannot see it. Oh, it's maybe under. Ah. That's the gods having their say. So Scottish appliqué work, 17th century, and there are all the icons for the rows and the turning wheels that are the swastika symbols as they take the world to war again and again. Below, a masked lady on horseback with a page, the Scottish thistle and the English rose. Scottish thistle, and that is still given to the people that are in the black nobility as an icon for their capacity to fleece the world. And there are the oak trees and the leaves that are the commemoration of the killing of every pagan on this earth, by the angel's wings technology that is splitting the ribs open at the back, with a semi-conscious victim, and then pulling the lungs through those broken ribs, and that becomes the angel's wings, the most cruel joke in world history. And that is the acorns that both the British soldiers and the Nazis had on their uniforms, on their lapels, right through the war, to show the power of Arius Piso and his massive joke that is Christianity, for profit and keeping the hungry eaters' numbers down. Right then, sorry it took me such a long time to discover that that is just a cover for the image. Let's see if they've got dungeons. Oh, wow, it's absolutely fabulous. So here's James Hepburn now, and the history of Hollywood. He lived 1535 to 1578, 4th Earl of Bothwell and Duke of Orkney. That's Bothwell on that Langham Road where Rabsy Nisbet is from. Lord High Admiral of Scotland, Border Leader and Baillie of Lauderdale. Married Mary Queen of Scots, 15th May 1567. Died hairy and in filth after 10 years imprisonment in a bottlenose dungeon at Dragon Castle in Denmark. God, my history's way out of date. And there is the Stuart symbolism. James Hepburn, 4th Earl of Bothwell. And I think it was him that had the other lover executed. And that becomes the Darien scheme and the Panama Canal, and all of the money for all of those projects disappears forever when the administrators get their hands on it. And that is Davidson again and again and again. Mary's visit to Jedburgh. Mary's first and only child, James, born in June 1566, was only a few months old when she decided to come to the Scottish borders and preside over a circuit court in Jedburgh. Having previously sent instructions to prepare drink and lodging, Mary arrived with many of her prominent lords, including the Earl of Moray on 9th October 1566. James Hepburn, the Earl of Bothwell, was in Liddesdale at the time charged with the task of bringing justice to some of the most notorious borders reivers. He had been wounded in a skirmish and lay ill at Hermitage Castle. That is the structure that still exists today. All of it is totally intact except for the roof. The court in Jedburgh sat for 6 days, and Mary then set out to visit him. The arduous return journey, more than 40 minutes undertaken in a day, was not unusual for her, but on her return she fell dangerously ill. Many theories have been suggested as to the nature of her violent illness, and it was only the swift action of her French physician which saved her life. On 25th of October she was presumed dead, but within a few days she was seen to be recovering. Lord Darnley, lodging elsewhere in the town, visited his wife on 28th October, possibly his only visit before leaving. Within a few months Darnley was dead. On 9th November Mary left Jedburgh and headed for Craigmillar Castle on the outskirts of Edinburgh. I think that's next to where the zoo is now, and I don't think they have poodles in there. Jedburgh had played host to almost all of the main characters in the unfolding drama. Would that I had died in Jedburgh, said Mary, but the tragedy of her life played on. Hermitage Castle is a remote fortress around 25 miles southwest of Jedburgh, a grim defence post for the English-Scottish border. It was the home of James Hepburn, the 4th Earl of Bothwell, the man who would eventually become Mary's third husband. Jedburgh had played host to almost all the main characters in the unfolding drama. Would that I had died in Jedburgh, said Mary, but the tragedy of her life played on. This French enamelled thimble case is said to have been accidentally left by Mary when on the ride to Hermitage Castle. The royal party stopped to allow a repair to her dress. French watch and case. This was found in 1817 after being unearthed by a mole at Queen's Mire, a spot passed over by the royal party on the return from Hermitage Castle. And there is a pear wood cigar box said to have been made from a pear tree planted by Mary in the grounds of this house. Can you hear the wind outside? Stirrup found en route, taken by Mary to Hermitage Castle and attributed to the royal party. It's absolutely tiny. All of these exhibit concern stories associated with Mary's stay in Jedburgh. And there's another set of stairs, and it's absolutely beautiful. Mary Queen of Scots and Lord Darnley. 1556 was a significant year. At its start, Mary was in her prime, both as queen and as a woman. She had the support of many influential nobles, and she was pregnant with Darnley's child. Her marriage to Darnley the previous year had strengthened Mary's claim to the English throne. However, it soon became apparent that Darnley was an arrogant and jealous man. Mary's fears were confirmed when he became implicated in the murder of David Rizzio, her trusted Italian secretary at Holyrood Palace. And there is a beautiful home, and the building structure is exactly like this one that we're in. Queen Mary's house, in remembrance of her grandfather, and that is in Roxburghshire. That could be this one. It's absolutely pissing down on the building now. So Arthur Perigal RSA, that's the Royal Art Society, presented by Mrs. Palin of Monty Python's in remembrance of her grandfather James Stevenson, Procurator Fiscal of Roxburghshire. So that's why we've had the little weather storm. That is law enforcement, right up to my persecution by the lawyers on behalf of the Chipping Norton Society, David Cameron, and my wife as a spy for MI5 and MI6. Mrs. Palin of the Pythons. We must be getting near to heaven now. Jedburgh's position just 12 miles north of the border made it very vulnerable to attack from the English in the 15th and 16th centuries. In 1409, Jedburgh Castle was demolished. It was frequently held by the English, and the Scottish government felt that it would be better for it to be destroyed. The castle was replaced by a number of fortified tower houses, which together with 4 ports enabled the town to be defended from invasion from all directions. When Mary Queen of Scots arrived in Jedburgh in October 1566, she was accompanied by a large retinue, and the party would have needed a number of buildings to accommodate them all. Fire broke out in Mary's first lodging, forcing her to move. It is known that Mary paid Lady Ferniehurst